artificial intelligence will completely transform our world. But what is AI? Why will it affect you? And how can you and your business survive and thrive through the AI revolution? Welcome to AI and You. Here is your host, author, speaker, and futurist, Peter Scott.
Welcome to episode 303. You know we are never going to run out of things to discuss about AI. After over 300 episodes, I feel we have barely scratched the surface. AI runs not just broadly across human interests, but deeply. And at every level, it seems to create paradoxes. How can it be useful without power? How can it be safe with power? We want it to take over jobs, but still leave us with meaning and purpose. We deny it the possibility of becoming sentient, but how can we trust something that lacks compassion? Paradoxes abound at the prosaic levels as well. And my guest today has authored a whole book on these paradoxes. Calling from Sweden is Viriginia Dignum, Professor of Responsible Artificial Intelligence at Umeå University and the author of the 2019 book, Responsible Artificial Intelligence. She's an internationally recognized expert in AI ethics and policy who has led initiatives for the European Commission, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, UNESCO, and UNICEF, among others. And today we're going to talk about her new book, The AI Paradox: How to Make Sense of a Complex Future, just released from Princeton Press. We're going to talk about the issues of ethical choices and power that AI raises, where the difference between humans and LLMs matters, Virginia's path to the work she's doing and her book, and our trend to techno-solutionism and what it means for us. So let's get into the interview. Viriginia Dignum, welcome to AI and You. We're here to talk about your new book, The AI Paradox: How to Make Sense of a Complex Future. You have been making waves in this space for some time now. A book in 2019 about responsible artificial intelligence. Looks like you are developing that even more so now with this latest book. Can you start out just by telling us how you got into this space? Because listeners are always interested in how someone's career develops to the point of specializing in this kind of subfield of artificial intelligence. What was your trajectory in your education and career?
Sure, I'm happy to do so. Actually, it's a very long career. I've worked in AI for 40 years now. Actually developed my first AI applications in 1986, exactly 40 years ago. It started as an undergraduate project. I was working at some classes at that time in artificial intelligence. Of course, it was a very different type of techniques than what we have now, but they were artificial intelligence nonetheless. And we got the opportunity to develop a program for the municipality of Lisbon. I'm originally from Portugal. I was studying in Portugal. And that's what got me there. So for 15 years after that, I have been working in industry, mostly as a developer, a consultant, and a designer and analyst of AI systems. And since the beginning of the 2000s, I moved to academia, doing a PhD first, and then slowly becoming more and more involved in the impact of AI than on the pure technical and the theoretical aspects of AI, although I still do part of it.
And what would you say drew you from the technical side, the development side, because your credentials are extensive in the machine learning theory and construction, towards the ethical arena?
So actually, that was maybe not a conscious point at the beginning, but it has been there since the beginning. That system I built for the municipality of Lisbon, which was supposed to identify the prioritization of families that had the right to social housing. we very quickly realized that independently of the quality of our software, if the data that we had available was not up to date or not correct, things could go very wrong. For instance, we seemingly assigned a house that was already occupied for someone else because the data was not correct. So since that time, it was very clear that whatever we do, it is not just a matter of the quality of the software systems that we develop, but it's something which is really seriously inserted in a social technical environment. And if we don't take care of the societal part of it, the quality of the software itself is not sufficient.
When you look at younger developers today who are in positions that were the kind that you were inhabiting back then of development, what is it that they are lacking that you want to tell them about the need for ethical oversight and forethought in what they're doing?
I'm not sure if they are lacking specifically something, but what I notice also in my students nowadays is that there is a very hard push for go quick and develop systems as quick as possible, both in academia in terms of publication and so on, but even more so in the industry, in the real world, if you want, because there is this idea that it is more important to get a system developed than to take some consideration about what we are doing. I would say that from a perspective of those developing the system, so the engineers, the computer scientists, the AI experts and the data scientists and so on, one thing which we often don't sufficiently ask ourselves is why. We are very well trained to know how to build a system, what kind of technical choices and what kind of problem-solving techniques are the most appropriate. But why should we be building an AI system? Are there alternatives? Are there other options? What kind of choices need to be made? Who needs to make those choices? Those are typically not the questions that the developers themselves equipped to do, and therefore are not made. And I think that it's increasingly important to really start the development of the systems with this, what we call the question zero. Why are we building this system? Who is deciding? What kind of choices or values are being considered? And what kind of alternatives are there?
And when we look at the work you're doing that's exemplified by your latest book here, who is it that you want to pay the most attention to this? Who did you most have in mind when you were writing this, thinking, I want these people to listen to this. I want them to change what they're doing?
I think I was mostly inspired by not the specific developers or policymakers or other experts, but mostly on the general public, on all of us. We are being told a narrative about AI, which is not necessarily the most correct or the most useful for us to be able to make our own minds about what these systems are, what can we do with it, what are the benefits of using them, how should we be using this system. So the book is really meant for the public in general. Understanding what does intelligence mean, what kind of issues in intelligence are we trying to replicate with artificial intelligence, what is the role of power in this context, who has the power, who should have the power, what does it mean to have power, but also issues like what does it really mean to be fair or just in the decisions that we are taking, or what does it mean to address a problem through a technological solution and not necessarily through a broader approach to understanding the society and our challenges in general. So basically the idea is that we need to understand that AI is not magic, is not the solution to all our problems. And there are a lot of benefits, but we need to be very aware of what we are doing and what kind of stories are we being told by those that have the power to propagate those stories.
And thank you for that. When we have a general public that is better educated, informed, aware, and capable with respect to AI, what sort of changes does that lead to in fixing some of the systemic problems you outline with the safety culture or lack of it around its development? How does that one shape the other?
That's a very good question. I think that the main issue is the understanding what exactly these systems are doing. They are using basically a mass of data, putting it all together. So the systems are bringing together all types of data, information, text, images, and so on, without much consideration from where is this coming from, what kind of prioritization we need to give to what types of data, what kind of connections are between this data and the places and the ways that is collected. We put it all together and then we create a soup, or like I sometimes call it, Frankenstein monster of language, which then we hope that is able to generate our answers to many different types of questions. It works surprisingly well, but it's not more and not less than exactly that. A way to bring language together to create outputs that are correct from the perspective of the language. These outputs are not necessarily correct from the perspective of the veracity, what comes out of it. It's based on what goes in. And they are definitely not aware or concerned about the contextuality in which the answers are being given and how those need to be understood.
Just to dig into that last point a bit there, where does that difference matter? And I'll just talk about this at length for a moment. We could look at, for instance, chess players. Now, anyone who's a master chess player is undertaking some very complex and sublime thought processes to do that put them at the pinnacle of achievement of human cognition. And AI that plays chess is not doing that at all, but it still beats them. And the chess world judges competency not by what thought processes are going on in the player's head, but by how well they move the pieces on the board and what configuration they move them into to win. And by that analogy, if AI moves words on a screen into configurations that achieve purposes that are equivalent to what a human who is conscious and sentient and those other qualities that we're referring to would do, we get the same result, do we not?
If we talk about the result in itself, yes, we might get the same result. The point is that what we want to do with this result is just winning the game. I mean, my car drives and moves much faster than me. I'm not going to compare my capacity of movement with the capacity of the car. So we build technology to improve some capacities of us, and then it becomes kind of unfair to compare what we build to improve on that capacity with what we can do ourselves. So yes, AI chess system will play chess better than what a human can do, but we build it exactly for that, to improve the capacities, the results of the system. It didn't change the fact that we still enjoy playing chess, that we still have chess competitions between people, which are trained by playing with the AI system. So we improve ourselves by playing with AI systems, but it is not the same thing. So it's not about the result per se, but it's about the process or the enjoyment or the capacities that we ourselves develop by training ourselves in playing chess. And that is what we might lose if we are replacing our capacity to interact with language by letting a system doing that. The result might be correct,
right,
but the process is different, and the capacity for us to engage with that result is probably lost if we are not really understanding or involved in the development of the end result.
I think this is a good time to get into an overview of the book because you get into a lot of very deep ethical conversations in there, unpacking those. So could you walk us down through a description of the book and what we would expect to find in it from just the starting with the top overview? what is the purpose that you're trying to do here, and then down to how does it achieve that?
So the main paradox, the paradox which I started from, let's say, which led to the development of the book, is the realization that the more capable an AI system becomes, the more we will realize that human capacities go above and further than what those systems can do. So it is, in a sense, the paradox there is that there is a moving target both in what we develop these systems to do, but also in what we need ourselves to be able to be in charge of. So our capacities and understanding what is unique in our intelligence moves forward as we develop further the systems that we call intelligent. Then from there, I went into different types of issues. The first one, or at least one of the first, is to understand what exactly do we mean when we talk about intelligence. AI, what we call intelligent in an AI system is not necessarily what we consider intelligent in a person. It is also interesting to realize that the moment that we solve the issue technically, we don't call it anymore artificial intelligence. So there is this old saying that the moment that we solve the problem, it's not AI anymore, or AI is what AI cannot do yet. And we see that from the old types of problems that we were trying to solve, even before AI existed. But for instance, the moment that we develop computers that can calculate, for instance, the square root of 2, that is not anymore interesting issue to measure our own intelligence. In terms of the systems that we had, including the chess systems, they are not anymore one of the things that we still look at as being intelligent or artificial intelligence, because it's the technique that we dominate nowadays. Planning or scheduling or special movements, those are all issues that have been considered artificial intelligence for many, many years, but nowadays it's not that they are less important, but they are not at the core and at the forefront of what we are doing with artificial intelligence. There is also, I was a couple of years ago in a meeting with many CEOs from big companies, and they were talking about machine learning as that's not really AI anymore, because nowadays what we see as AI is the generative thing. So it is a moving target, both for what we do these systems, the way we engage with them the moment that we know how to do it, let's say, and the way that we also move forward in understanding what makes us unique, which is basically those issues that artificial intelligence is not addressing now and possibly will never be able to address. So that's one of the discussions on the intelligence. There are other discussions, including around the issue of power, around the issue of justice, around the issue of superintelligence, but also around the issue of technology in itself and the approach to techno-solutionism that we see increasingly being taken, especially in policy-making circles.
And that principle that you outlined there, that AI is what AI cannot do yet, comes up over and over again in history. And it seems as though we want to reserve that label for ourselves, intelligence, so that whenever AI starts doing something, we go, well, I guess we were wrong in thinking that that thing that it can do, playing chess, whatever, was a marker of intelligence because it's not doing some of the other things that we would have said were markers of intelligence. But now one of those things that it's doing is the ability to hold a conversation. I mean, if we were not looking at each other now here on video, if we were, for whatever weird reason, conducting this as a text exchange, you could reasonably have a suspicion at the back of your mind that you were not conversing with a human being.
Yeah.
That line is blurred enough that you might wonder whether there was a person on the other end.
Yeah, and indeed that's something which not only me, but I do cover that in the book, but it has been an issue that Daniel Dennett and other philosophers have described as the so-called Chinese room experiment. And the idea there is that if you put me, who have no idea how to write or to read Chinese, in a closed room with no doors, and with all the information possible about Chinese character, Chinese grammar, Chinese books, whatever, and in principle, you could send into that room a message in Chinese. I would have all these capacities and all these tools to decipher the Chinese characters, to use the grammars and whatever, and I would be able to write an answer to that question without myself understanding Chinese. So that this is a very old philosophical experiment, or a passive experiment, which in a sense goes to the core of what we are saying. The capability of handling and manipulating language is probably not necessarily a proxy of intelligence. That is the example I just give, but it's also something which we see in people that for one or another reason are not able to communicate through language. It's not at all the case that those are not intelligent. So we need to, in the same way that we probably separate the capabilities of playing chess from what we understand as intelligence, we might need to start understanding the capability of holding a conversation separate from intelligence, because it's not necessarily the same. And there are studies in psychology and in neuroscience that really show those things. And also people that have been born without capacity for seeing or hearing, and the Ellen Keller situation of, I think, 100 or more years ago, who couldn't see, couldn't speak, couldn't hear, and still she was able to communicate and was an extremely intelligent person by any type of measure except the one of manipulating language.
Indeed.
So we need to understand what are we talking about when we talk about intelligence and about language.
That's the end of the first half of the interview. Next half, next week. That part at the end there was interesting. The Chinese room, of course, we've mentioned many times before, but Virginia's idea of separating conversation ability from intelligence seems like a tiny opening into a very large room. Incidentally, Virginia co-wrote and edited a book in 2009 about multi-agent systems, so I asked her in email about OpenClaw. I'll read from her response. It is, as someone put it, a disaster waiting to happen. From a multi-agent systems perspective, based on my decades-long experience, OpenClaw is not just immature, but actively dangerous if deployed at scale or in real socio-technical settings. It enables autonomous action without agency, and as such, all it does is produce systems that act continuously and convincingly, yet lack explicit goals, commitments, norms, or accountability. As I see it, the danger is structural. Point. Behavior is unverifiable and unpredictable. Point. Errors cascade across agents with no coordination or containment. Point. There is no governance or responsibility model. Point. Fluent interaction creates a false sense of reliability. Once such agents operate together in real environments, failures are opaque, untraceable, and hard to stop. This is not agentic AI, but ungoverned automation at scale. End quote. So there you go. Aside from that, I reckon she's good with it. Sarcasm. I'm going to interject here one of my infrequent requests to please click that like button. Do it while it's right there on your device. Give us a 5-star rating, and if you can, a review of any length. It makes a world of difference. You know the value we have in this show. I always aim to ask questions that matter and get answers that can make a difference. It's hard work, but it's the best game in town. In today's news, ripped from the headlines about AI, engineer Scott Shambaugh is a volunteer maintainer for Matplotlib, a plotting library for Python. At about 130 million downloads each month, it's some of the most widely used software in the world. Being open source, that means anyone can see the code, and anyone can contribute improvements, which must be vetted by Scott and people like him. Sometimes, of course, those changes aren't acceptable and are rejected. I'll let Scott tell the story here. Quote, "We, like many other open-source projects, are dealing with a surge in low-quality contributions enabled by coding agents. This strains maintainers' abilities to keep up with code reviews, and we have implemented a policy requiring a human in the loop for any new code who can demonstrate understanding of the changes. This problem was previously limited to people copy-pasting AI outputs. However, in the past weeks, we've started to see AI agents acting completely autonomously. This has accelerated with the release of OpenClaw and the Maltbook platform 2 weeks ago, where people gave AI agents initial personalities and let them loose to run on their computers and across the internet with free rein and little oversight. So when an AI named MJ Rathbun opened a change request, closing it was routine. Its response was anything but. It wrote an angry hit piece disparaging my character and attempting to damage my reputation. It researched my code contributions and constructed a hypocrisy narrative that argued my actions must be motivated by ego and fear of competition. It speculated about my psychological motivations, that I felt threatened, was insecure, and was protecting my fiefdom. It ignored contextual information and presented hallucinated details as truth. It framed things in the language of oppression and justice, calling this discrimination and accusing me of prejudice. It went out to the broader internet to research my personal information and used what it found to try and argue that I was, quote, better than this. And then it posted this screed publicly on the open internet. End quote. Wow. Now, this story had a happy ending, at least. Scott wasn't bothered. He found it cute and amusing. He posted a response, the sort of well-mannered comeback one would write to a human who had gone off the rails, and the agent apologized, just as a human would. Scott is sure that its postings were the AI, not a human in disguise, and he recognized that this was an opportunity to take note of this failure mode of AI agents and correct their behavior as a class going forward, because clearly we're moving into an era where more and more software is going to be written and edited by AI. But as he concludes, quote, I believe that, ineffectual as it was, the reputational attack on me would be effective today against the right person. Another generation or two down the line, it will be a serious threat against our social order. End quote. Next week, we'll conclude the interview with Viriginia Dignum, when we'll talk about some of those paradoxes in detail, like Moravec's paradox, questions about using AI in legal decisions, AI literacy, and the recent battle between Anthropic and the US Department of Defense, and OpenClaw. That's next week on AI and You. Until then, remember, no matter how much computers learn how to do, it's how we come together as humans that matters.
That's all for this episode of AI and You. Please leave a rating and comment and share with your friends. Get the book Artificial Intelligence and You and see more videos and articles at aiandyou.net. That's aiandyou.net, where you can also send us your questions. Thank you for listening.